Hi, and welcome to the second part of the video. This one, hopefully people will find it interesting. It's really as much about the transmitter as it is about the car. Bought this transmitter getting on for a year ago when it first came out. So it's the Spektrum DX6R, and initially I was very pleased with it, and then software update that happened just after Christmas kind of messed it up a bit for the things that I want to use it for. And I've been waiting a while, and to my delight, last weekend I turned the device on, and it's actually got an Android screen on the front, which you can see loading up at the moment. And to my delight, there was a software and a firmware update which kind of fixed everything that I was finding problematic, and also I think it's added some new features in too. This is a high-end transmitter for the cars, and really for me, what I wanted was the kind of functionality that you get on a stick or a tray radio, but I wanted it in a pistol radio because I wanted the ability to drive the car one-handed, because I'm often out in the forest filming cars and things. Maybe I'll be walking the dog at the same time, and I need to be able to drive the car with one hand. So really I wanted a pistol grip radio. The most channels that I've got on any of my pistol grip radios are 4 channels, so I've got the DX4, which is great, but I actually wanted the extra channels for the extra functionality. So as you can see in front of you here, it's an Android device, and usually I'm an Apple person, so I do find Android a little bit difficult to get my head around. And so the application that you need to run, and you'll see it here, is the veiwed app. The screen itself is a touch screen, just like on a phone, and for using this I find it quite useful to use a little stick with a soft rubbery bit on the end, because it can be more accurate than using your finger. So we're just loading up the veiwed app here now, and what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be going through in some detail the various screens that I used to set up the car, because I think that anybody who's thinking about using this radio for this kind of thing is potentially quite a useful thing to see before taking the plunge and potentially buying this radio, because it's not cheap. Now, when you're setting the cars up, you get this screen here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the start of creating a new model so that you can see the sort of steps I went through. By the way, you might notice here that the photos of the cars are the same as each other. You can actually send a photo of your car and upload it into the model itself, and it'll appear up in the top right hand corner here, and so you can actually have photos of all of your models. I will just for a moment go in to create a model to show you the first stage of the setup. So the first thing that you do is you give the model a new name. We're just leaving it as new model. Click on next. You then tell it which transmitter you've got, which receiver you've got. The receiver which I'm using in the Jeep is the SRS 6000, and that one has actually got telemetry as well. So we just click on that, then it's next. It then goes through a series of things to ask if you've got it. This AVC is a sort of assisted vehicle control, I think it is. Basically it overrides the throttle and the steering in race cars if it detects that the car is going out of control. We don't have, or we're not using that because that would use another 2 channels. Wants to know if it's electric or gas. Wants to know whether or not you've got reverse. So for this model I'd said that it was reverse capable. Asks if you've got 1 or 2 motors, because it's actually got the programming to be able to cope with a motor at each end of the car. We've only got a motor single motor, and steering, you can have dual steering or single steering. So all of these things that you tell it about in the initial setup, and then, and this is probably the most important part of what I wanted to show you here, is you've got the auxiliary channels. The great thing is you can actually name each channel, and that gives you the ability. So for instance, rather than mixing aux 1 to aux 3, what you might be doing is you might be mixing the throttle to the sound, and that's a much more intuitive way of being able to program things. So you just go through each one and it'll ask you what you want to call it. So you just tap on it, full QWERTY keyboard, and then it'll ask you if you want to name another one. So on and so forth, and so you just go through telling it what each one is called. I'll try and be quick here. Here we go. And so what I've done is I've done the basic setup. So we've got steering, throttle reverse, and then we've got these named 4 channels, and it will then ask, it will then invite you to save the settings, and then it will ask you to bind. Okay, that's enough of my fake new model. What I'll do is I'll just go back and I will load up my 1/6 Jeep TJ and show you the settings that I put in there, and I will tell it that that one is the active model, so it'll load it and we're in. And you'll see up at the top here that it says 1/6 Jeep TJ, so that's the model that we're on. Now you've got a number of screens. This first screen here, it's kind of just got the basic information on it, with timers. You can have 3 timers, and it shows you where your steering trim and your throttle trim is, your steering rate, etc. And all of these parameters can be programmed in and changed with on-the-fly buttons, and you'll probably see 1 or 2 of those in a moment. Now you've got the 4 dots across here, which takes you across the 4 primary screens. So I'll just move to the next one. Now this one here is because the radio has got telemetry, and actually this particular receiver has got telemetry. What it will do is it will be tracking the temperature, and I've actually put a sensor around the motor so I can see if the motor's getting hot. It'll track the main battery voltage. For instance, if I was running lipos, I might be interested to see it going down. And this one here, that's throttle and brake, I can actually put a detector, and I'm half thinking about it, on the output from the transmission, so I can measure how fast I'm going. But to be perfectly honest, the speed of this is so low that it would be more of a novelty, and I'd probably try and program in a scale speed or something. So that's that screen. The next screen here is much more useful, and this is the monitor. And so for each of the channels, you can see the channels are actually programmed in. So the steering and the throttle were standard, but my aux 1 is the shift, so that's the changing of gears. And then we've got the lights, which also turns on and off the power to the motor, sorry, to the motor sound. And then we've got the indicators for left and right, and then we've got the sound. And if I just show you, so if I'm with the steering knob, you see the steering moving. With the throttle, you'll see that going up and down. The shift, and I've actually got quite a small range on there because it doesn't need very much. The lights turning on and off, if I can remember which button I used for that. Here we go. You can see the lights turning off with one of the buttons. The indicators, and you'll see that I'm using a 3-position switch here, so that in the middle the indicators are off, and that will be left and right indicators. And then the sound, which is actually mixed. When I pull on the throttle, you'll see nothing happening at the moment. when I push the button for the mix, you'll see how it moves, but actually in the forward it moves a lot less, and again that's in the programming, and I'll show you that in a couple of moments. Okay, this screen here, a really important screen, because this is where you set everything up. I'll start with the mappings, and what this does in this part down here, it basically tells you what you've got every single button and trimmer and everything else doing. So I've got my trimmer C for my auxiliary 3, and if I look up the auxiliary 3, it's indicators. So trimmer C is the input from that channel. When I'm wanting to mix the throttle to the sound, you'll see down here, trimmer F is my mix activation, etc. So really good for you to be able to see what you've done, just as the monitor is really good to see the effect of it. Okay, I'll just go back. Right, so for each of the channels you're able to do your settings. So in steering, I've actually put some exponential in there because I actually want it less sensitive around the center. I've turned off some of the on-the-fly buttons for things because I could have the exponential actually coming on and off with a button, and you can tell it what you want for the trim steps. Steering rate, again, you can have an on-the-fly button for that. For what I'm doing here, that isn't needed. And I've got a monitor there, so you can actually see the effect of what you've done before you turn the car off. You can limit your travel. As it turns out, I haven't needed to limit it, but for centering up, I've actually put in 66 of right hand sub trim. So basically at 0 normal trim, the car is driving straight. With the throttle, I haven't really had to do anything to that at all. There are things that I could have. I could have traction control, whatever that might mean, ABS. I can change the servo speeds and a number of other features. I haven't done that with this car, but this is a high-end transmitter, and it's, I think, largely meant for 2 or 3 channel race cars, and where you might want these sorts of things. For my shift, my gear stick, I've got a 2-position toggle on one of my trimmer switches to activate it. You'll see I've slowed the servo speed right down because actually you get a smoother gear change if you have it moving slowly. It's nice to have that option. Again you've got the monitor, so you can see it moving left and right, and you can see how I've only got 17% of movement to the left and 37% movement to the right. Let's go back. My lights are pretty simple setup. I've just got it toggling, so it's just 2 position, it's on and off, and that particular button will only allow you to do that anyway. And next we have sound. I've got this linked onto a knob, and that's what allows me to change the speed of the sound without the car moving. It also allows me to adjust it slightly up so that the sound module doesn't think that the cars are idle, and therefore doesn't try and stop after 10 seconds. So it lets me control when the motor switches itself off. I've got the servo speed reduced on this, and that's just to add a little bit of delay, which you can also do in terms of how you set up the sound thing anyway. We've got the monitor and all of the same kind of parameters as you've got on the other ones. Probably the last thing that I would show you is the mixes, because I did let's go back. I did set up one mix, and they allow you to give the mix a name. So again, it's quite nice, rather than having to remember what mixes 1, 2, 3 and 4 are. For instance, this one here is called engine sound, and if I just click on to see what I set up, so we've got the name, engine sound, it's been enabled, and the source is the throttle and reverse. Trim isn't included because I don't want to pick up the trim in the mix. The target is sound, so again it's much more intuitive to have a target of sound rather than a target of aux 4. And what I've done is I've actually got 2 different values. So the mix to the right, which is acceleration, is only 62%, and what that does is it means that it keeps the revs lower when you open the throttle right up, which I think is a more realistic sound on this, because a lot of the sounds are really set up for race cars, and a Jeep isn't a race car. And it also stops it topping out, which means that it doesn't reach the level at which it starts trying to change gear in the sounds, which again I didn't really want in this. Reverse at 100% was fine, and you've got a range of activations. You could have it always active, but I didn't want that because I want to be able to drive the car without sound when I don't want the sound. So it's activated by a button, and in this case it was trimmer F, and it's toggle, which means that if you click it, it stays there until you click it again, and it's simple as that. So I thought it was worth spending a few minutes going through the detail of the setup, and this isn't really so much so that somebody can copy this for building this car. It's just so that, you know, a person thinking about one of these for a scale car rather than a race car can see what the capabilities are like. There isn't anything here that you couldn't, you know, quite simply do on I don't know, a Spektrum DX8 or really any aircraft transmitter with decent programming capability. But the one thing you can't do is you can't walk around the forest with one hand driving it. So in the next bit of this video, I'm just going to go through some of the physical characteristics of it. Okay, so the transmitter itself, in many ways it's quite similar to other handheld transmitters. One quite nice feature is that you get a number of different pieces that you can put on here, and you'll see that I've got this quite close to the hand grip. The only reason for that is because I want to be able to drive one-handed, and I can actually stretch my thumb over to the steering wheel, and so if I want to, I can use the throttle and the steering wheel and drive along with one hand while the other hand is free. I don't use a GoPro camera or something like that. On the subject of GoPro cameras, because I've got the Session as well as the one which I'm using to make this video, this can quite simply be put on here, and that allows me to film and drive at the same time if I want to. And the really neat feature is that this is an Android device here, and so if there we go, so here we're back to the main screen here, and you'll see that I've got the GoPro capture app, so I can actually be walking along driving the car, and the screen here will be showing me whatever's on this camera, so that I can do filming actually using one hand to drive and film with, which is quite a handy feature to be able to have. Okay, so I've talked about that. The knob that I was using to change the volume of the throttle is actually this knob here. For changing gear, I'm using this 3-position switch here. For turning the lights stroke power to the motor on and off, it's a push button here. There are about three positions, actually 2 3-position switches and 1 push button inside here, which are actually duplicated on the other side as well, and I use the top one of those to turn that mixer on and off for the motor. There is another 3-position switch here, which I'm not currently using for anything. I've got the steering trim on this button, the throttle trim on that button there, and that I think is just about all the buttons that I'm using. Transmitter's not too heavy, lasts a decent time, and so far I've been pretty pleased with it. I haven't done much in the way of field tests because, as I said, the firmware and software have only just updated themselves to a version which is really usable for what I'm doing here. When I want to update the software, it's actually done through the Play Store. I'm just clicking on that, and so if I want to see if there are any updates to it, here we go. Raceware I've already searched for before. There it is here. Spektrum DX6R Raceware installed, and so I guess people who are familiar with Android will be used to this sort of thing, but I found it dead easy to upload. Once I'd uploaded the software, as soon as I opened the app, it actually updated the firmware, which is the bit which runs the thing itself, and it's absolutely faultless. High-end transmitter, so you can have it left or right-handed. I think it's a great piece of innovation. I don't mind the fact that it's taken a little while to get right, because I suppose I'm like an early adopter of this, and you can sometimes expect teething troubles with something which is totally new to market, bringing different technologies together. But I think it's great, and I think it's really the way of the future for this sort of thing. Well, I hope that those people who've made it to the end of this video have found it useful and interesting. The next video, I'm probably going to take the car out and show you a little bit of it running before I start doing more work on the body. Thank you for watching.